Hey, I'm Matt. This is my 2-year review update on the Wahuda jointer. I get 5 common questions pretty regularly on this jointer. And they are, do I still like it? How has it held up? What are the limitations? What do I not like about it? And would I recommend this jointer for most people? If you're making tabletops, cutting boards, charcuterie boards, anything like that, and you need 2 pieces of wood to come together seamlessly, in other words, they look like they're made together, this tool is what you need. Or if you're constantly dealing with bowed, warped, and twisted lumber, then this will help you straighten all that out. Do I still like this jointer? Absolutely I do. I use it all the time for a ton of different purposes. Well, a couple of different purposes. Face jointing and edge jointing. It's held up beautifully. I love the fact that it has these extension arms that allow you to joint longer boards, because that gives you a total overall length of about almost 54 inches, which is 4'6". So that allows you to joint longer stock and have support on each end. And they store out of the way when not in use. The micro adjustability on this Wahuda is awesome. All you have to do is loosen this knob, and then this knob on the bottom down here, you can just turn it, and then this will adjust the height of this end feed table. And it will go all the way up to 1/8 of an inch that it's going to take off of the material. Once it's set, you just tighten this knob back down, it's not gonna move. It's also 110 volts, so you can use it on most any outlets in your shop. It does have a safety switch here that you can remove that, and then this isn't gonna operate, so if you have small children or something in your shop, you wanna protect them, you can keep this piece out of this machine. I like that this is a helical head. I love the fact that they have the blades on here can be turned, so you actually get 4 different blades or 4 uses out of the same blade. All you have to do is loosen this and then turn the blade, and you can see there's multiple blades on there at different spots on this head so that you get a smooth cut all the way across. This tool is included, by the way. Nothing to do with the jointer itself, but it does come with these 2 tools, and if you're like me, you lose stuff like that. These rare earth magnets are very inexpensive. I use them all around the shop. I'll put a link in the description. But that's how I keep those tools right there. They're out of the way and they're always on there. The fence is easily adjustable. You can just loosen these little knobs. That allows you to slide it to and from. You can also raise and lower it, as well as turn it to a 45-degree angle. As a benchtop jointer, you can take this thing around and move it around the shop as needed. As you can see, it weighs a fair amount. It's not super light, but it's also not so heavy that you can't just move it in and out of the way when you need it. The number 2 question I get is, how has this held up for me? It is built like a tank. Now, the fence is aluminum. This is a thinner stamped metal down here, but this is a cast iron top, and that's what makes it so heavy, and that keeps anything from twisting and moving. Everything stays flat, and that's what you want. Now, I have actually dropped this on the floor on its face. How did I do that? Well, this is my rolling cart I built several years ago. There's a video on how to do that, but I keep my planer and my jointer on there. When I'm using the jointer, I'll typically take it off of here and move it to the table. However, sometimes I need to move it out to get to a sheet of plywood back there. When I pulled this out a while back, I didn't realize that the planer was hanging off the edge too much, and when I jerked this, it fell forward onto the concrete floor. To say I felt sick to my stomach is an understatement. I thought I had surely destroyed this thing, and I was scared that I ruined the fence. I didn't. Nothing broke. It did knock it out of square. I squared it back up. It's held up perfectly. So what are the limitations of this that I found? The length of boards that you can successfully edge joint is fairly small, depending on what you're jointing. If you're up to about 5 feet long, you should be fine. The problem is when you're trying to edge joint thicker, longer stock, you wind up out here, and the weight of the stock itself, even with the extension arms, is very hard to control and keep pressure down at the cutter head. Once you push through and you get to the other end, the same thing, it kind of starts going the other way, and you wind up with an off cut. In other words, it's not curved, but it's also not perfectly flat. So if you're trying to edge joint tabletops, things like that, you'll see that gap. I have ran into a couple of times where I wanted to face joint a board that was wider than the allowable area, which is 8 inches without the fence. So if you're trying to face joint 1x10s, 2x10s, things like that, then I would step up to a 10-inch. As far as power goes, I have never once heard this thing bogged down on anything I was jointing. I have face jointed and edge jointed Purple Heart, walnut, maple, pine, spruce. None of that ever bogged this thing down. Of course, you're only taking minor amounts out at a time, But even face jointing, this thing performs flawlessly, has plenty of power for anything you're gonna need to joint with. One thing I really don't care for or don't like about the jointer that I think should be improved is the fence. Now the fence works perfectly fine unless you put pressure to the back. This is aluminum. The way it's mounted on here, everything kind of flexes, not kinda, it does flex. Not that that has mattered at all in anything I've jointed. Just be aware that it will flex left and right as well as out of 90. Another limitation or something I don't really care for is the dust collection on this, especially if you are jointing stuff like ambrosia maple or pine, spruce, the softer type woods. It seems to get clogged up in here if you're using a shop vac as your dust extraction. If you're using a 4-inch hose on a regular dust collector, then it pulls it out of there just fine. You don't have any issues because you have enough volume of air being pulled through the dust collection port. Number 5 on the list, would I recommend this Wahuda jointer? Absolutely, without a doubt. Especially for beginners or intermediate woodworkers, if you're doing a lot of cutting boards, charcuterie boards, or tabletops, things like that, this thing has worked phenomenal for those things. And I have been very, very impressed with this. And it has really leveled up my woodworking because it's been in the shop. If you get this jointer, pick up these 2 push blocks. The reason I say get 2 is these things have these little teeth or cleats that pop down or they store out of the way. I like to use one up front and push through the jointer. That keeps pressure at the cutting head. And then on longer stock, this piece will need to be pushed from the back as well as keeping pressure down. And this is the only push block that I've seen that's like that. And then you can easily push through the jointer, keeping consistent pressure. What that's gonna do is give you a nice flat surface. This jointer literally changed the way I was woodworking. Before, I was actually using my table saw to joint boards with a 4-foot level. And that works really well, but it's not perfect, and you can't face joint with that. And face jointing, to get those boards flat on 2 sides using a jointer planer combo, you're able to get 2 parallel sides. And while I still do use the jointing on a table saw method for very long pieces, like on the table I build with the breadboard ends, I was able to take that to the table saw on a really wide piece and edge joint using that level. And that helped get that breadboard perfectly straight on there so there was no gaps. It looked really nice. For the whole tabletop going together, I was able to use this and got really good, consistent results. And that's one thing, the level sometimes didn't give you consistent results. This will every time. I got this jointer in September of 2020, so we're almost at 2 years. We're really close to 2 years, so I'm calling it a 2-year review. There is quite an amazing story on how I got this jointer to begin with, and the original video is linked right there. Click that box and go watch it. You'll love the story. Click in the box, get you the big old virtual fist bump. Also, another one of my favorite videos right there.